Hello ladies and gentlemen, Matt the Editor here, and welcome to the commentary on Doctor Who Figure Adventures Season 2, Episode 2, Arthur and the Wizard Doctor. Now, as I mentioned when I opened my script call out back in, when was it, 2005, 2016? I mentioned that this was actually an earlier script from the Matt Smith series, from when I was actually writing a series for UDWF1. Whilst I was actually writing the production for season 2, I was also looking at some old scripts for the Matt Smith series that didn't go out, and I thought it would be a shame to waste these scripts. So I thought, why not I reuse one of them? I mean, I already reused one of the scripts, Chasm of the Drift, for season 1. I thought, why not do the same for season 2? And out of all the episodes, I think I had the most fun writing back then. Arthur and the Wizard Doctor was pretty much it. So I thought, I've got to bring it in somehow. Now, obviously, by the time this was released, Doctor Who actually made an episode where the Doctor meets Robin Hood. And I was a little worried that at some parts of it, some fans or people who've watched this video might think this has some similarities to a Robot of Sherwood, but when you actually watch and compare the two, it's really completely different. I mean, for one, the original script was a two-parter, yeah, and since the script was actually written for Matt Smith, I think it would have really worked if Matt Smith was the Doctor, either with King Arthur or with Robin Hood. I think it would have worked well. And also, back then, we would have had other companions, like the companion at the time was Abigail and her boyfriend Robert. Obviously, you can tell it would have been, or Amy and Rory. But whilst I was actually rewriting the script, I mean, one of the things I was sort of thinking of doing was this would be the episode I could bring a new companion in, and I've always wanted the idea of what if the Doctor had a companion who was like a soldier, a knight, a servant, a merchant, someone from the past, someone from the medieval times. How would that play out? And well, since I was a massive fan of Merlin, I mean, hence why I actually wrote this episode, and there are some clips actually from the Merlin show. I thought this could actually work. I mean, I'm not saying Godfrey is Merlin. I mean, even though he does have some similarities to Merlin, yeah, I've always thought, well, what better way to have the companion than someone who is, the servant to King Arthur. Now, obviously, when I was rewriting the script, there were some scenes that were much longer. I mean, part 1 was pretty much a very long, drawn-out tournament day. Kind of like in the Merlin episodes where, they have like a tournament or a knight's duel where knights from all across the kingdom come to fight, and one of the Doctor's companions was to actually be in the fight to test his skills. That was pretty much the entire episode, and then something goes wrong at the end of part 1, and then part 2 is when they actually look for the Grail. As you can tell, there was like a lot of scenes which I thought I thought made no sense. I thought I had to take some characters out, and I had to sort of cut it down to like one episode. And honestly, for the most part, I think I did a decent job, because honestly, this is an episode I had the most fun with. With series 1, it was episodes like Chasm of the Drift, Phantom of the TARDIS, Bridge to Eternity. With season 2, this is quite possibly my most favorite episode to have ever worked on, and I'll discuss more exactly how and why later on. So yeah, as we saw there, that was Arthur coming across Godfrey. And basically, we find out that the TARDIS came from like this wormhole, kind of like the time fishes from Day of the Doctor. So basically, in the original script, it was pretty much the TARDIS just crashed into an alien ship, which then caused him to crash into medieval times, or in this case, Camelot. There we go. This is actually a clip from the BBC show Merlin. I had to include that show. It's a great castle. But yeah, basically, the idea I saw for was, the Doctor sort of come through sort of like a time rip, and he's ended up here. He's met with Godfrey, and he shows him one of the knights, Sir Galahad, and basically he was pretty much traumatized by this rip, sort of like, as we saw there, he was erasing his mind. But yeah, here we go. This is when we actually meet King Arthur. And I gotta say, the set for when it comes to like set design works, this one I think is my absolute favorite. I mean, I pretty much used the same the Hogwarts Great Hall, which I used for the Church Hall in Series 1. I then used it to sort of to hold up the purple walls in the previous episode, Twilight of the Time Lord. And when I knew I was actually making this episode, I knew I had to bring the hall back. And most of these flags, I will admit, I did actually borrow the symbol of the dragon from the Merlin show, because I really wanted there to be a Doctor Who Merlin crossover, and if the BBC can't do it, I might as well do it. Yeah, it's not the same characters or the same actors from the actual show, but come on, it's Doctor Who meets Merlin meets King Arthur. We gotta have fun with it. Oh god, yeah. As we saw there, these are actually for majority, it's Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Robin Hood, and Game of Thrones figures. And basically, I bought these figures from my first ever Comic-Con that I visited, and I came across the Game of Thrones figures. Even though I'm not a fan of Game of Thrones myself, it didn't really grab me. I did like the look of the characters, and when I saw the action figures, I thought I've got to include them in this episode, and I think I did a good choice. And of course, when I bought the Peter Dinklage action figure, I had to make him Lancelot. I mean, yeah, it's kind of predictable, but since Peter Dinklage is such a cool actor, I think he would have been amazing as Lancelot. So yeah, obviously there was some short jokes. I apologize for any short people out there, but basically, I didn't want it to be a big fuss. I did want to make the characters I picked to be respectful, sort of Knights of the Realm sort of thing. There we go. As we see there's a Legolas action figure there. There we go. There's the Hound, and I don't remember which figure I used for Guinevere, but I think it's supposed to be Jean Grey / the Phoenix from X-Men: The Last Stand, or I think it's whatever her name is from Game of Thrones. I don't know. But basically, I was so lucky to have found those figures whilst at Comic-Con, and I really hope to use them again in a later episode or so. Now here we go. This by far is. This entire scene took forever to film, it took forever to shoot, it took forever to make, it took forever to edit, and it was all worth it in the end, in my opinion, because this by far is quite possibly my favorite animated scene of all time. I mean, yeah, there are some similarities in like later episodes and in earlier episodes, but this was actually very different to me, because by then I was at university, and I knew I had to really up my game as a stop motion animator, even though I'm mostly doing 2D, but I wanted to up my game as a stop motion animator. And since I would have been filming a sword fight between the Doctor and the Knight, I knew I had to step forward. I knew I had to up my game. And here we go. This scene, this bit here, this took like 2 days to film. Just basically this entire scene, mostly being because of lighting, spatial awareness, and some now and then my parents would normally come in to watch television, or my dad would do the ironing. So yeah, it was quite a stressful time. So yeah, but basically this entire scene with building the sets, it took like 3 days to actually film this scene, which shows how an animator normally works. But yeah, I absolutely had so much fun with this scene. Even though there were some times where some of the figures would actually fall out of the out of their seat, out of the boxes, and I had to like restart it again. And yeah, they were like, and most of it was edited. I mean, when I normally edit my Final Cut, I use Final Cut most of the time to do the stop motion stuff, but in this case, I had to use Premiere to sort of shrink the frames, even though I knew it was going to take forever to render. It had to be done. And honestly, I'm so glad it worked. Because honestly, this scene in particular, because whilst I was filming a later episode of Doctor Who, I was talking with my friend Sam, and he mentioned to me that he had a comment from someone, I can't remember who it was, but they basically said that they had never seen such amazing stop-motion animation in an action figure adventure ever. Because of that scene. And when I found out about it, I thought, oh, that's absolutely amazing. I feel so proud. I feel so oh, here we go. There's like a lot of scenes we're missing out going on, and I'm already talking about that one fight scene. It's just so good. I'm so proud of it. Now, I will admit that bit when the guy had just sort of nudges Godfrey, just you rogue. There was actually a line that Galahad was supposed to say somewhere along the lines of, you think we should get the maids to do the work for you? And he's just like, it's not a joke. You rogue. And then the scene just continues. I don't know what, I'm guess the voice actor, I can't remember who it was, forgot to record that line, but I didn't mind. It still worked. Now, the original script basically had like sort of demons as the villains, and I kind of wanted to bring elements to that, but at the same time I didn't want to I didn't want to bring magic into this world, because I mean, maybe there was magic at real times, but I wanted to keep this as sort of historically accurate to the King Arthur legend. It took me like a lot of time to think what could actually happen, and I thought one of the things I think what a lot of people remember most about the King Arthur legends is the romance between Lancelot and Guinevere. How they pretty much left King Arthur before King Arthur went off to battle. I knew I had to include that sort of storyline somehow. Oh yeah, there were some Narnia figures. I forgot there were some Narnia figures. But yeah, I knew I had to include that sort of story element somewhere, and I thought it would be a nice idea if Lancelot and Guinevere, not the actual ones, obviously, we later find out they're actually controlled by the Unthirst, which is actually some sort of energy from a ship that crashed onto this world, and well, we find out later on. I did sort of think maybe this could actually work with Lancelot. Maybe get the idea that they want to overthrow Arthur so that they can use the knights to sort of take over the world. Just sort of generic fun kids adventure sort of stuff. I did find it a little tricky at first. Just basically how to write these characters. I mean, because we know Guinevere is mostly loyal to Arthur, but she does love Lancelot, and I didn't want to make them full evil, so I had to make them like they were controlled somehow. But we'll discuss that later. Here we go. Let's see. This is the scene. Yeah. The Doctor and Godfrey. Godfrey finds out that there is a plot to kill the king at the anniversary ceremony of Camelot. Basically, they celebrate the day when the sword was removed from the stone, and this actually began the rise of Camelot. So basically, Lancelot and Guinevere, or so we think, plans to sort of poison the king, so that they can take over the knights of the Round Table, so they can find the Grail. Oh my god, that Okay, I have no idea where that crown came from, but I just came across it one time, and because I was basically sort of thinking to myself, okay, we know this is King Arthur, but I was trying to think if how to make the crown, because I didn't want to make it out of clay, I didn't want it to make it out of plasticine or blue tack, and then I found that crown, and I thought, can it work? And clearly it doesn't work, but I'm actually glad I still, I used it. Even though there was like a lot of times where during the filming, the scene, the crown falls off countless times. I had to put it back on and make sure that the alignment of where, where the patterns on the crown meet the head.
For the love of Camelot.
For the love of Camelot, yeah. Oh yeah, and that's my friend Thomas Roberts, good friend. Who, he also voiced Stephen Connie's dad in season 1, and I knew I had to include him with having returned as King Arthur. Yeah, and he we still keep in touch. I mean, he's a fantastic designer. Maybe I'll put a link in the description of where you can follow him. Now here we go. This is when the reveal happens, basically, and
planning to kill you.
yeah, outrageous. Now, I will admit, I did actually, by the time of season 2, I sent out like a call sheet on this casting agency, Star Now. I sent out a casting call for mostly the female actresses to voice the female characters, because there doesn't seem to be like a lot of voice actresses for figure adventures. With an exception of Juliet Raw, who voiced Romana, and she also voices Freya, the servant girl, in this episode. No one was interested in voicing for Guinevere, and I was running out of time at the time, so I had to do the voice. Oh, I will say, I'm actually impressed with how that sort of effect turned out. But yeah, basically, I didn't want to make the same mistake, because, like, I had to voice Mary Jane Watson in my Spider-Man figure adventures, like, a couple of years ago, and it was so very squeaky, and I did not want to make that same mistake. Now, if I was to like remaster this again, I would get like an actual voice actress, or if I did have to do the voice again, I would turn it up a little bit, because there's like a couple of moments where you can't hear what Guinevere is saying. Trusted and loyal knight, yeah. Here we go. This was actually a last minute addition, adding the glowing eyes, which don't actually play a plot later on this episode, so I could do it again. Okay, that was actually kind of funny. Yeah, just this robot. Oh yeah, yeah, Metal Man. However, it's not really Metal Man, but basically, I was trying to think exactly how you could reveal what these type of creatures are, because originally, the demons were meant to be like sort of walking armor with glowing green eyes, with like laser guns and all that. And at the time, I did not know how I can do it with the action figure of the Hound from Game of Thrones. I mean, even though he had the giant scary helmet, I wasn't quite sure how to, fit it into the description of the demons. So, whilst I was making the teaser trailer for season 2, I then had added in basically pictures of the Destro action figure from G.I. Joe, and I sort of photoshopped it on his head when he turns. Not perfect, but I guess I really had to think it through from there. But then, as luck would have it, I can't remember. Oh yeah, it was at Forbidden Planet. I basically walked into Forbidden Planet, and all of a sudden I came across, I think it's a Halo action figure, and I thought, this would be a nice idea, just to have these be the armor of the Unversed. Yeah, even though it kind of downplays the use of the Hound from now on, but it was still pretty cool to have that action figure to animate. Now, I should say, as we saw, there was a Snape action figure. I was sort of thinking to have that action figure in a later episode to play the trickster, but that idea was scrapped. So I thought, why not use him as the physician? And he was actually supposed to speak. There were a couple of lines that were recorded. They were edited, and they were added to the scene. but I think it might have been because of running times, or maybe the scene was just taking too long, or maybe it wasn't working. I then decided to cut out the his entire dialogue altogether. I can't remember who voiced him. I think I know who voiced him. It might have been Type 40FA, or was it Trent Willis? Or either way, I apologize for whoever did the voice of the physician. I apologize for not including you, including your dialogue for this scene. Now here we go. This is obviously a scene. You know, there had to be a scene where the doctor sort of is interrogated by King Arthur about his technology, his sonic screwdriver. Looking back at it again, I think this scene should have been before he was put in the dungeon. You know, like 'cause he says sorcery sees him. Yeah, and then then we would have had this scene. But I think the idea of having the doctor being interrogated by King Arthur after the such bad events happened, I guess it kind of makes sense that he would talk to the doctor about what he knows about this sorcery of sorts. Now, as you can tell, there's like some sort of blurry on some of the picture frames, like the scenes in Arthur's office, or if it was with Lancelot and Guinevere in their bedroom, in her bedroom, or Godfrey in bed. Most of it was done using my phone, because at the time I was sort of thinking maybe to use my phone on some shots. Also, I couldn't find my camera at the time, and all the batteries were dead. So I tried using my phone, and for the most part, I think it works. But I will admit, they don't give off very good quality on the photos. Nevertheless, you will go. Now, in the original script for Arthur and the Wizard Doctor, at the end of part 1, we would have seen Arthur fight one of the companions because of the Lancelot betrayal, like he's been sleeping with Guinevere. So they basically fight, and it turns out, obviously the companion wins, and Arthur realizes, oh, maybe he was wrong. But then one of the knights is revealed to be a demon, and he basically shoots the companion and then teleports, and that's where part 1 would have ended. Part 2 was originally written similar to Day of the Moon, where King Arthur held the Doctor and his companions as hostages. He basically didn't want to tell his knights or his kingdom, because he didn't want to give the crowd a bad idea that their king has been working under sorcery. And that's when they plan to go out and find the Holy Grail. But basically, obviously, I had to take that scene out because reading it again, it really did not make any sense. And I thought maybe the scene when the Doctor's being interrogated about what's going on, and then they decide to go out and find this Holy Grail, which may or may not exist, and we'll talk about that later. Now, I should say, the other two knights, the Legolas and Thorin Oakenshield action figure, I did think of giving them lines of dialogues. I even had lines of dialogues written for them. I can't remember whether I didn't have enough time to find any voice actors to voice them, or maybe I didn't think that they were in any importance to the story. So basically, I had those. I basically had them not say anything, but the scene still played out well. Now, these outdoor shots, they were actually filmed outside my garden, because basically at the time, my dad and my brother-in-law were sort of fixing the fence, and on the lower level there was like a brick wall, and I thought, oh, that's actually a white brick wall, similar to how Camelot was. So I thought, I had to take a photo. I had to take like a couple of scenes of that, and I only had the Indiana Jones horse, which is used for the Doctor and Godfrey. I only had that horse at the time. I did ask Sam at one point, did he have any horse action figures, since he had the action figure for Godfrey one time. He didn't, so I basically looked on eBay and I looked on Google Images to find any images of horse action figures, and I managed to Photoshop in. And as we saw earlier there was like a shot of the horses running through the trees. I actually quite like that scene, even though I think there was a point where you can see a line somewhere running across the screen. That's pretty much where the edge of the picture ended because of the green screen. And obviously we didn't see Godfrey on his horse at that point. But I think as far as like rough sort of horse animation and sort of transitions go, that was actually kind of impressive, in my opinion, anyway. Maybe I should have made that scene longer. It would have been nice to have like a little horse ride through the trees. And another thing I should have said whilst we were talking about the filming outside was there was originally supposed to be a scene where, because basically originally Freya was not supposed to have been kidnapped. Basically Godfrey was supposed to be injured, and it would have been Freya who would have looked after him in the room. And then when they go out to set off, Freya comes along and sort of like, hugs Godfrey goodbye or good luck, and basically you would have found basically there's not like a line of dialogue. It's just facial expressions sort of and movement, and basically you would have seen the Doctor watching it from a distance, and you would get the idea, oh, those are friends. There's some sort of bond between them. And even though that scene was included in the trailer, I suddenly realized, oh damn it, I made a mistake. So that scene was entirely cut, which is a real shame because I really like that scene. I think it would have made a lot more sense. But I've still got the clips somewhere. I don't know whether I might release it as a deleted scene or something, but who knows. Now, and another reason it would have worked is because because this scene we would have seen Arthur and Galahad would have discovered that Lancelot, Guinevere, and the unversed soldier or Bedivere, they would have captured citizens of Camelot, some of the knights, and we would have found out what they've done with them. And Freya would have been one of them. Now, basically, that wasn't included. It was because the original script basically had characters going in a different direction. Because originally, it would have had the Doctor and Arthur walking in the woods, and Galahad and Godfrey would have gone to find the ship, and and the dialogue sort of scene would have been exactly the same, but basically one of the things I actually wanted this episode to be, I wanted the focus to be the Doctor's relationship between Godfrey, not just with King Arthur, and hence the line where he says, "Funny, for some reason it's focused on you." It was a line that was actually originally written for King Arthur, and basically when I was animating it, filming it at the time, and when I was writing it, I suddenly realized there's not a lot of scenes between the Doctor and Godfrey at all, and I thought, and when we found, and you would have found out at the end, there's literally no reason why Godfrey would have gone with the Doctor. Why would the Doctor want to bring Godfrey on his new adventures? So I decided to switch the characters around. I had Godfrey follow the Doctor, which I think works, and I had King Arthur and Galahad go and find the ship in the volcano caves, which I think works. And hence we get like these nice little scenes. Now, much like the scenes by my brick fence was outside for Camelot, the scene with the Doctor and Godfrey walking through the forest is actually filmed outside in my garden, which is next to a fish pond, which we have. And obviously, I used my phone at the time. It was starting to rain at that moment, so I had to be quick. And since, basically, because I wanted them to come across this sort of entrance to the volcano / the ship at some sort of cliff, or some sort of cave which they come across through the woods, and the only place I can think of was the pond, because at the time it was covered in grass, and I thought, oh well, there's my chance. And hence we got that little scene, and we added in like some sort of dust effects and the door opening, and there we go. Now I should say the scenes, basically the ship scenes, most of it was like some of the pieces of like the machineware. That's actually from a it was done by action figures sets. No, action figure theater. Sorry. Lawrence Phillips and his team. And at the time, they did a paper set for Adam West Batman, because it was in tribute to Adam West's passing. And when I came across it, I thought, I've got to use that somehow. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure exactly how to design the ship, because I wanted to be sort of ship-like, but also make it look like they were blended in with their environment. Hence, what the doctor said when the doctor said the ship became the volcano. And there we go. We would have seen all the people in the containers. Now in my head, I actually wanted it to be like a long corridor full of machines and gadgets and wires and containers, and then there would have been like a lot of people in there. But when I was like sorting out the containers at the time, the printer was running out of ink, and we didn't have enough ink cartridges at the time, so I had to keep it short. I had to keep it short, so I only had to include like the 4 containers. And here we go. We would have seen how they got in there. Basically, this was actually a sort of like the last minute thought, because I wasn't quite sure exactly, because most of the time it's focused on the Doctor, Arthur, and Godfrey, and Galahad is just there. So I thought, well, what can we do with him? So I thought, not really kill him, just basically sort of have his body be evaporated into millions of pieces, and then they put him in like one of the containers, which then actually becomes like a sort of like a clay silver soldier of sorts. Now, most of the scene, mostly from Guinevere, the dialogue of Guinevere, it was actually turned very quietly. So I apologize when you watch this episode. I apologize if you can't hear exactly what Guinevere is saying. That's mostly because it was mostly my voice turned up very high, and it sounds really, really silly. And I didn't want it to be silly at that point, but at the same time, I knew I should have turned it up.
What are you doing to those people?
Now, when it comes to like the villains, the original script, which had the demons, their plan was basically to basically take over Camelot, because the demons in the script were supposed to have been their version of Morgana. Hence, if you've seen the series Merlin, or if you've read about the King Arthur legend, Mordred and Morgan Le Fay were like the antagonists or the villains of this legend. And the original script did actually have Mordred in there, but I didn't want Mordred to be in here, because if I wanted it, it's just in case, because I was thinking if I was to do, like a future episode where the Doctor comes back to King Arthur's time, and hence it's the time when the battle of, where King Arthur is killed by Mordred, would have happened, and I thought that would have been an interesting idea to come across, and the idea was that Morgana wasn't going to be a person; it was the name of the ship, and basically their overall plan was basically just to take over the world, and most of the soldiers were most of the Knights of the Round Table were then killed and put in the containers so they can make sort of resurrected demon soldiers, that sort of thing. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with these guys, but I didn't want to include Morgana or Mordred at all, because I thought it might come in later. So so basically I came up with the idea is that the Young First have no physical appearance, so they basically used whatever was around them, and they decided to create King Arthur. They basically created Camelot to give the people in the time period hope, just so that they can attract them and then steal their bodies, that sort of thing. Now this scene was actually used in the original script. We actually had it was actually Arthur did actually go after the Doctor. Godfrey wasn't around at the time. He basically went after the Doctor because he then finds out that the Doctor knows that Arthur will die at some point. I've only just realized that my biggest mistake is that I mostly kept it close to the BBC series of Merlin, because I actually found out in research that Mordred wasn't a druid. He was actually King Arthur's son, I think it was. I can't remember, but basically he wasn't a druid. He was basically made a druid in the BBC series, and since this one wasn't technically, well, as we find out, it wasn't technically the same as isn't technically canon to the BBC show. I then suddenly realized, oh yeah, Mordred isn't a druid. Whoops. But I'm glad no one noticed that at all. I'm glad no one sort of noticed that and says, oh well, actually Mordred was not a druid. That's just a BBC show. It actually works for the scene, because we do find out, Arthur does learn that it's not it's his own choices that make him whether or not he is a good man as well as a good king, as we saw there. And the original script was technically after that they do find the Grail, and in the original script it was actually a cup. It was actually like a goblet which they find somewhere in the caves. And when I was rewriting it, I thought I might as well play with it a little. Maybe the idea of the Grail was actually what people believed. Like when people say with people with their religions or their faith, like they think the world was created by this, or their god is a being, an animal, a spirit, that sort of thing. I thought maybe I could play with that aspect with the Holy Grail. So I then decided that maybe the Grail isn't really a cup. It's actually a crystal, or basically an energy crystal. As the Doctor says, it's a piece of a moon star that actually crashed with the ship. Hence is how they managed to how Camelot was actually created, because the moon star was basically it's basically some sort of energy that sort of creates reality. It's basically the reality stone from Infinity War. That's pretty much the best way to describe it. But that basically comes in with the idea of people's faith, their belief, as well as their courage and their dreams. How that sort of plays out. As we saw a couple of seconds ago, Godfrey actually went towards the giant crystal and actually took out a piece. That basically plays a part in the at the end of the episode, but I'll explain that later when we talk about it. But basically the Doctor finds the Grail. They find the Grail, and then they're captured by the villains, and the villains have the gauntlet. And in the original script, they basically make their army rise, and they go and attack Camelot. And the Doctor, Arthur, and his friends have to stop them. And I might talk about it later, because it does play a part in an earlier scene. And with this one, it's pretty much the same. And since this is one of the things I sort of thought I had to borrow, not steal, not do a repeat of, but sort of slightly borrow from Robot of Sherwood, where when the Doctor and Robin go into the ship, and they discover that they actually learned from the legend of King Arthur, and so they use that to play a part. And the Doctor pretty much thought, oh, that's how they could have done it. They used the legend at the time to create false hope to the people around them. But then it turns out, oh, Robin Hood was actually real, and it turns out this is actually talk about how some stories fade into legend, which is actually a good idea. And I kind of wanted that sort of element with this, but I did sort of think maybe off. But I also did want to give the idea that maybe this version of King Arthur was real. Maybe he wasn't real. Maybe it was like the BBC show, or maybe it was done like a different way. Hence, later on in a later scene where the Doctor says, "This is the legend of King Arthur. No one knows what really happened." And I thought that ought to play a slight part in it.
How did you do that? Once you spend your life tying up horses, you might learn a few tricks.
Now I should say, because if you're watching this version, in the original release of this episode, the line where Godfrey says, "Well, when you tie up horses, you will learn a few things." For some reason, that line wasn't used in the when I originally released this video. And then I don't know what happened. But basically there was like a model up with the audio, and basically when I re-released it on the Who Editor Extra channel, I had the chance to re-edit the audio, and yeah, it's much better now. And hence, here we go, another fight scene. Now, fun fact: when it came to like the fight scenes, I actually edited the music / the audio of the sword fight, and I basically had to animate along with the music and along with the sound, which is what most animators normally do. They normally have, like if you were doing like a musical sequence, you would have to see how animators would play the visuals with the audio or the music, and that was kind of the same thing, similar with this episode, with these scenes. Now, and I should say there were like a couple of scenes and a couple of alternatives when it came to like the animating this scene, like where like how Godfrey would have defeated Guinevere, how the ship would have self-destructed, how the Doctor would have gone out. Because basically at this scene here, the original idea was that Godfrey was to have run down the corridor to follow the Doctor, and then he would have thrown the screwdriver at the Doctor. That's a cool. That's a pretty cool edited effect there. I'm actually glad of that. And basically, but basically, I wasn't quite sure why Godfrey would run down the corridor when he had seen Arthur, Lancelot, or. So basically, I made there be like a balcony where he can like chuck the screwdriver. And here we go. Godfrey proves that he is a worthy possible knight by saving Arthur. Now I should say I was a little worried about this scene in particular. Basically the defeat of King Arthur, because I even though it is actually kind of similar to Robot of Sherwood, I was a little worried that maybe if I did that, I think I would have given a bad impression that short people, that I've killed a short person, or or short people are evil, which I don't want to get across. I know some short people, and they are fantastic people. I did film an edited version where basically the Doctor just uses the solid screwdriver to make Lancelot lose his sword, and then he would punch him in the face. But I thought that's a little generic, and I knew that there's a lava pit. There was a lava pit on the floor, and there's a balcony. I knew I had to play with that somehow. But I did feel bad about it, and I wasn't quite. And I thought, well, maybe I wanted to give the idea that maybe. Hence, we find out that none of them remember what happened. I wanted to give the idea that maybe none of it did happen, and hence we can actually continue the legend of King Arthur. So I thought when they bring everyone back with the crystal, Lancelot comes back, and he's a good man. He doesn't remember anything. Guinevere is a good person. Basically they've restored history, and. Yeah, I'm actually glad that I made the right. I feel like I made the right choice.
It's all because of that brave boy. Where is he?
Yeah, where is he? I think we all know where he is. Now, one of the things I actually kind of wanted it to be is that I wanted a reason. Not only did I was thinking how could the Doctor bring Godfrey with them, but also I was sort of thinking like, why would he take Godfrey? Why would Godfrey go with him? And at the same time, I was thinking back to the previous episode where, you know, the previous episode where there was something dark or depressing, and I knew I had to go I had to have like something fun and adventurous as the next episode. And I did want the Doctor to think that, oh, this is happening again. I've just met this guy only for like 1 day, straight after I've already lost a friend, and already it's starting again. Hence this, you know, basically the Doctor and Arthur talking about each other, basically about their choices, and, you know, whether they think it's right, or whether they do is right or wrong. Should they really help people? Is it right? Basically, they sort of question what is right. And since I was sort of thinking that it was to be a talk in a corridor, it was a talk in the office, that sort of thing. But since I already had the courtyard of where the jewel was out, I knew I had to have that scene filmed there. I'm actually glad I actually did, because where else can you have like a good scene with two good characters than a good set?
Not to look back, but it still follows you.
And now I should say, this was actually something similar to the original script, because the original script of Arthur and the Wizard Doctor, it would have, obviously the climax was completely different. Basically, you would have had like the fight in Camelot. They would have stopped him. They would have destroyed the Grail, that sort of thing. But then you would have had like Mordred would have tried to have killed them again, but one of the companions was supposed to have got injured or basically dying, and so the Doctor had to save him by putting him in one of the containers and then send him back. And I wasn't quite sure how to do. I wasn't quite sure exactly how I could use that scene, but I did think maybe this could actually, this could play a part in why the Doctor decides to take Godfrey. Not only because he knows, that he thinks that if he uses that piece of the crystal, which because he would know if he used that crystal on Godfrey, it would sort of erase his memory. So if he did remember anything, his mind would sort of burn, kind of like what happened with Donna in like End of Time, that sort of thing. So the Doctor decides to basically take Godfrey almost like as his own, to protect him, whilst at the same time Godfrey has sworn an oath to be the Doctor's guardian. And I kind of wanted that. Now, I should say, basically, we find out the crystal was actually an actual crystal, which was actually a piece of it was a geon stone, which I found on a trip to, I can't remember where it was, but it was on a trip, and I basically found like a couple of packs, and I thought I had to use it somehow. That gold piece, which is actually a Lego piece from Pirates of the Caribbean, that was actually filmed at the time when I filmed the scene in the courtyard, and the Doctor had that crystal. That was actually supposed to have been the Grail. But then when I was filming it, I then suddenly realized, I've used the wrong prop. How am I going to fix this? How am I going to fix the continuity? So then for them, maybe Godfrey did come across that same piece in the same giant crystal when they were there, when they did actually find the Grail. And I thought, well, since Godfrey was affected by the crystal when they destroyed it, hence it sort of killed him. He did have the piece of the crystal with him, and hence since it still has its energy, the Doctor could have used it to bring Godfrey back. But in doing so, it would sort of wipe everyone's memory at that point. And so basically the Arthur just told the Doctor, well, if he wipes Godfrey's memories, please wipe ours, because I don't want to think about my fate. I want it to be a surprise. I want life to be a surprise. Because if we keep going on our lives knowing what's going to happen, we won't appreciate what's happening now. That sort of thing. and hence, you know, he says take care of him, and so the Doctor does. And here we go. This is the scene with Godfrey is basically just wiped. His memory is wiped. And he basically thinks he was left out on the streets, and the Doctor has basically decided to sort of take him in and look after him as his own guardian. And hence the adventures of the Doctor and Godfrey begin at this little scene. Now obviously as I saw that there was like a little black screen there. Yeah, this was mostly at the time where most of my editing was mostly done rushed, or there was some moments where I didn't cut the scene, or I didn't cut the clip properly. But that's just a nitpick.
Why would you want to go into a castle where there is a whole
So basically,
waiting for you?
he's basically taking Godfrey away from his home, away from his life. He's basically lying to him, because he knows if he tells him the truth, then Godfrey would die. His mind would sort of burn from the crystal's energy. You know, he would die. He doesn't want that to happen again. So even though he's glad that he's got someone to travel with now after Connie is gone, he's still wrecked with guilt that he has done something wrong that has basically ruined a person's life. Not only Godfrey's life, but this girl Freya's life as well. Because basically he's just basically taken her friend away, which will then play a part in the series finale, and we'll talk about that later. And there we go. So basically the Doctor and Godfrey are traveling, and yeah, that's basically it. That's Doctor Who Figure Adventures Season 2 Episode 2, Arthur and the Wizard Doctor. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this commentary. Yeah, as you can tell, my voice is cracking at the moment. There was like a lot of stuff to talk about in this scene, and rightfully so, because this is actually one of my favorite episodes of all time. So there you go, guys. Thank you for joining me for this episode, and be sure to join me next time for episode 3, Day of the Cybermen, the second collaboration with UDWF1. Take care.